What happens when you take the combat from the ancient sport of Kushti and combine it with the energy and colorful characters of Bollywood? Well, you get professional wrestling, but more specifically, you get ringkaking, TNA's failed foray into India. For decades, pro wrestling companies have tried to find a home in India and its over 1 billion residents. WWE famously have tried to leverage their Indian stars like the Great Khali and Jinder Mahal to help plant the WWE flag in the nation. It's not a bad strategy as their ratings in the country are double what they are in the US. But WWE has a hard time touring the country as they've only been there a handful of times. Other promotions have had TV there or tried one-off tours that weren't successful enough to run them again. Then there's TNA's ringkaking. And if I mispronounce anything coming up, please forgive me. In 2011, TNA announced they were working on a show to air in India exclusively. It would be a collaboration between TNA and Indian production company Endemol. The show was aimed at giving the world of professional wrestling an Indian spin. Endemol reached out to TNA because of their popularity in the market and their willingness to be a partner and not just produce the show themselves like WWE would. Only problem was TNA had a deal with Sony 6 in India for all of their programming. Endemol was working with Colors TV. For context of how big this was, Colors TV is equivalent to a broadcast network in the US. Think SmackDown on Fox big. So this show couldn't be branded as a TNA product. So, ringkaking was born. Endemol had already run a similar show in 2009 with a South African promotion, World Wrestling Professionals. That show, named 100% De Dana Dan, featured a season-long storyline that saw the Indian wrestlers aligned against the South African wrestlers, with the Indians emerging as winners at the end of the season. The series did face some controversy when they ran an angle that supposedly killed off one of the Indian wrestlers who ultimately came back from the dead. But I don't speak Hindi, so I can't confirm that was the storyline 100% just by watching the whole series. So let's take the internet's word for it. Endemol felt the folks running that show didn't have the wrestling expertise to deliver what they were looking for. The production wasn't great, the wrestling was bad, so they decided to move in a new direction. This was a great opportunity for TNA with minimal risk as anyone working the show was paid by Endemol and their financial backers and not from the TNA coffers. Endemol was impressed with TNA's production, so they sent producers to visit the Impact Zone. They took over 1,000 photos of the setup to recreate it in India. TNA shipped a ring, and Endemol did the rest. Honestly, they did a really great job. Ringkaking looks great. In fact, several wrestlers were blown away by the setup of the arena. Endemol also requested half of the TNA roster be a part of the show, but Dixie Carter and Spike TV vetoed that idea as they didn't want that many talents off of Impact, so they mixed in some US free agents. The rest of the roster would be picked through a casting call in India. Taking people with no wrestling experience and putting them right into a new wrestling product, this, according to Jeff Jarrett, was the hardest part of putting the whole thing together. The casting call was overseen by Road Dogg and Sanjay Dutt. The auditions resulted in 300 guys picked from thousands of submissions. And that group was whittled down to a final 30 that would be trained for the show. The TNA talent they did bring in was carefully selected to be able to take on multiple roles. For instance, Abyss was brought in both for his in-ring talent as well as his abilities backstage as an agent. Nick Dinsmore and Savio Vega were hired to be able to train the new talents both prior to the tapings and guide them through their matches. Chris Masters was brought in as a familiar WWE face to the Indian audience. Magnus came in as an easy top heel considering his British background and the history of the Brits in India. Endemol wanted a biker character in the mold of American Badass Undertaker. That brings in Luke Gallows as Isaiah Cash. And Matt Morgan was pushed as the top babyface at the start of the show. Because, just look at him. Jarrett had wanted to try to integrate other TNA talents like Samoa Joe and AJ Styles, but again was denied by Dixie. Dave Lagana was named Director of Creative for the show at the request of Dixie Carter that the show have a writer, with the rest of the creative team being made up of Jeff, Sanjay, and Dutch Mantel. Jarrett also brought over Scott Steiner, who was an absolute menace on the program. It's awesome.
दोहराया जा रहा है जब भी स्कॉट स्टाइनर और मॉन्स्टर अबिस रिंग की ओर आते हैं तो सबसे पहले उन्हें ना जाने क्यों एक खिंचाव सा महसूस होता है और दर्शक दीर्घा में जाकर हुड़दंग मचाना शुरू कर देते हैं
जो पहले भी कई बार मॉन्स्टर अबिस और स्कॉट स्टाइनर ये कर चुके हैं पर आज ये इसलिए कर रहे हैं ताकि वो मानसिक दबाव बॉलीवुड बॉयज पर डाल सके
मुझे नहीं लगता कि बॉलीवुड
They shot the first 13 episodes in December of 2011, took some time off to make rewrites and adjustments, and returned in January 2012 to film the second half of the season. The live crowd was made up of a mix of wrestling fans, most of whom had never seen live wrestling before, as WWE had stopped touring there after a particularly disastrous tour in 2002. The rest of the crowd was made up of extras. It's pretty obvious who's who in the crowd. The first set of tapings were so well received that they had to turn tons of actual wrestling fans away when they came back to film the second half. Jarrett pushed to get those real fans in. They wanted to see the show, they were excited to be a part of it. But Endemol had a contract with the casting company to hire extras. They allowed some additional real fans in, but there was still a big chunk of extras. The real unsung heroes of the show, however, were the production team. Ringkaking utilized TNA's team of Keith Mitchell producing live in the truck, and not that Kevin Sullivan working on the post-production in Nashville. Jarrett explained why post-production is so important, stating that they could take a bad 8-minute match with these guys missing punches, blowing spots, etc., and turn that into an entertaining 5-minute match. It's magic. Endemol and Colors TV threw everything they had at making Ringkaking a hit. They brought in Harbishan Singh, a legendary cricket player, for an appearance. He was a very big get for the show. He wasn't just a great player, but had been a favorite of Indian media. After retirement, he married a major Bollywood star, did commentary for cricket matches, and even starred in some of his own films. He was a huge star there. Ringkaking hit the Indian airwaves January 28, 2012 on Colors TV with 14 million people tuned in for the premiere episode, making it the most watched wrestling show in the world at the time. Colors had committed to 26 episodes over 13 weeks. Yup, your Steiner math is right. They scheduled to air 2 episodes per week, one on Saturday and one on Sunday. Jarrett has said that this was one of his major regrets, that this show needed to air once a week. 2 episodes a week for a brand new show was too much for the audience to digest. He pushed back but was never able to convince the Colors brass to change the episode layout. They would also chop the episodes down to 30-minute versions that would air throughout the week. Another decision Jarrett opposed, as the shows weren't formatted for 30 minutes. Maybe they were airing the show too much. There is such a thing as overexposure. Even if it was being overexposed, Ringkaking was pretty damn entertaining. It had all the tropes of wrestling. A battle for supremacy between 2 groups, a chaotic wedding, good guys being tricked and duped by the bad guys, all with an Indian flair to it.
I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but Marky D123 already did a great series of deep dives looking at various aspects of the show over on his channel, so if you haven't done it already, check those out.
But the season ended with the major heel faction RDX running off in a truck with the gold. They gave us a cliffhanger. What would the babyfaces do next? Unfortunately, we never got to find out, as the series was not renewed for a second season. Some theorized the show ended due to the poverty in India, that the show couldn't make a profit because of it. While that may have some truth to it, poverty does keep people from being able to buy tickets to events. But look at the popularity of cricket in India. Full stadiums, the IPL sees an average attendance of over 32,000. Wrestling is a much more niche sport there, so that could be playing a bigger role in its failure, in my opinion. The actual answer as to why the show failed might just be the same story we've heard for decades with TV wrestling. The network saw a change in management and was looking to make a change, to get rid of wrestling. Sanjay Dutt stated in a podcast interview that the show ended because the network wanted to free up time for an MMA show instead. It's that simple. Looking back, Ringkaking can be seen as an important step in the development of professional wrestling in India. While the promotion ultimately failed to establish itself as a major player, it helped to raise the profile of pro wrestling in the country. In many ways, Ringkaking was ahead of its time. Today there are numerous promotions operating in the country, and Indian wrestlers are making their mark on the global pro wrestling scene.
While there is a language barrier, Ringkaking has some really interesting matchups and is filled with all of the silliness that we've come to love about professional wrestling. I suggest checking out a few episodes. It's pretty easy to find the entire series online. Be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts on Ringkaking if you ever checked it out, along with any other ideas for other shows you'd like to see me cover in the future. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Thanks for watching.